We have our big book, um, which on, at first glance looks really thick, but there's really only a few rules out of here that you really need to know to get yourself around the race course, um, in a way that keeps you from getting protested. Um, and those are really rules 10 through 20. And so it's only about this much of the rule book out of the whole section, um, that you really want to focus on. Um, that section is broken into a few parts. The first part, it's all a part of the bigger part 2 of the rule book. The first part, section A, has 4 rules in it. And those rules tell us in every situation which boat has the right of way. And you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with them, even if you don't know them by number. The first one is port starboard. Second, that's rule 10. Rule 11 is windward leeward when the boats are overlapped. Rule 12 is clear ahead, clear astern when the boats are on the same tack. And rule 13 is while you're tacking. And those rules never go away. They may have limitations, or you may, in the case of when you're entitled to mark room, you may get exonerated automatically for breaking them. But these are the right-of-way rules. Then we have the next section is the limitations on what a boat can do. The first one is avoiding contact. It's a limitation that you're not allowed to hit people. The next one is Rule 15, which is when you acquire the right of way through your actions, or in part through your actions, you have to initially give the other boat room to keep clear. And we'll talk about what some of those things mean. The next one is changing course. If you are the right of way boat, if you change your course, which is the compass direction that your boat is heading, you have to give a boat that's required to keep clear of you the room that they need to keep clear of you on that new course. And then the last one, which is the one we're going to talk about initially, is Rule 17, which is a limitation on a leeward boat in certain circumstances that they're not allowed to sail above their proper course. Those are our 4 limitation rules that as opposed to being all powerful right of way, it puts limits on, really puts some limits on the right of way boat. The next set of rules are what we do at marks and obstructions. Rule 18, going around marks. Rule 19, passing an obstruction. And Rule 20, which is room to tack at an obstruction. And as I'm sure you're aware, Rule 18 is the most complicated one in the book, and the one that generally gives people the most trouble trying to understand. Although it can boil down to a fairly simple thing of, if you're the outside boat, you give the inside boat mark room. Most of the time, if you do that, you'll stay out of trouble. So let's talk about, I think everybody's got a good handle on what the first 4 rules are. And as Sergey said, we wanted to talk about Rule 17, at least to start with. So let's talk about what that rule says. And what the rule says is that if a boat clear astern, so if I have 2 boats and I have a boat that's clear astern, becomes overlapped within 2 of her hull lengths to leeward of a boat on the same tack. So now I've got the red boat here, which is clear astern, and I've got a line here that's 2 of her boat lengths long. Okay. And I probably drew that too short to start with, but it's 2 boat lengths. Okay.
John, and that is the boat length of the second boat, correct? If they're not the same. Okay.
Correct. Within 2 of her hull lengths to leeward of a boat on the same tack, she shall not sail above her proper course while they remain on the same tack. So if the red boat comes in and within 2 of the red boat's boat lengths, if she crosses this line, right, she shall not sail above her proper course while they remain on the same tack and overlapped within that distance, unless in doing so she promptly sails astern of the other boat. Okay. So what does that, what does that mean? Red can come in here, and if she crosses this line, from clear astern, crosses that line and establishes an overlap, she is not allowed to sail above her proper course. And it's the leeward boat. The leeward boat has the right of way here. And it's the leeward boat's proper course that is her limit. So she's not allowed to sail above her proper course unless she immediately sails astern of the other boat. So you can cross this line and then decide, I'm going to luff up and go up here. As long as when I go up here, I then go clear astern. Okay. That's when it's okay to sail above your proper course. Okay. But it's red's proper course. And so let's ask ourselves, in the rules, the text of the rules, they italicize the definitions, and proper course is in italics. And the definition is a course a boat would choose in order to sail the course and finish as soon as possible in the absence of the other boats referred to in the rule using the term. Okay. And then it goes on to say a boat has no proper course before her starting signal. Okay. And that can be important. And we can talk about that. But on a free leg of the course, the red's proper course is to sail in a way that she thinks is her fastest way around the course. If you were to take the other boat talked about in the rule away, just pick them up and take them away. So in this case, red establishes this overlap. She's now restricted to not sail above her proper course. And the question becomes, what is that proper course? So you take blue out of the picture and say, okay, now how would red sail to finish as quickly as possible? Okay. The notion that, I mean, this boat has a theoretical proper course based on speed polars and things like that. But speed polars don't take into account waves, how puffy it is. Do you have the right sails up? Do you have enough crew weight? All of that stuff doesn't, factor into the notion of a theoretical proper course. So on certain days, you may have one proper course, and on other days with similar wind and similar speed polar answers, it might be something else. It really is up to the guy in red. The guy in blue, remember, we still have our right-of-way rules. Rule 17 didn't make those go away. If blue says, red, hey, I think you're sailing above your proper course, blue is still a windward boat required to keep clear, and they must continue to meet that obligation. Rule 17 doesn't turn that off. And so blue's only option, if they think red is sailing too high, is to continue to keep clear and then protest. That's their only option. They cannot continue to sail down and not keep clear of red. If red were to protest or blue were to protest, the protest committee can actually find that both boats broke rules and disqualify them both. They can say, red, we considered your argument about what your proper course was, and we believe you were sailing too high. And they can disqualify red for breaking rule 17. And then they can turn around and say, you know what, blue, you were wrong as the windward boat. You did not keep clear of red, and you're being disqualified for rule 11. So you can actually get a situation where both boats have broken a rule and both boats get disqualified. Where you see this kind of a thing come in is when the boats are sailing to a leeward mark. Okay. Once, if red is limited by rule 17, when they hit the ley line for the mark, right? And rather than moving the boats, I'm just going to move my mark up so that now red has sailed. And if we're going around the mark this way, right, red has clearly sailed beyond the ley line, if the ley line is where I drew it. Okay. Red is now sailing above her proper course. Her proper course is actually to bear at the ley line, is to bear off and jibe. Okay. But her proper course is at a minimum to sail dead downwind, right? So she's up here, she's sailing proper course, sailing proper course, sailing proper course. She gets to the ley line. Now her proper course is actually to turn down. So she's sailing above her proper course. Okay. So her proper course at that point is to sail dead down, to sail down, turn and jibe and sail to the mark. The further out you are on the ley line, the harder it is to know exactly where the ley line is. And red will get the benefit of the doubt as to where that ley line is. But once it's clear that red's beyond it, then red, in this case, would be breaking Rule 17. Blue can't suddenly jibe. She still is a windward boat required to keep clear. So she cannot jibe. All she can do is continue to keep clear and protest. Okay. But again, the protest committee is red is going to get the benefit of the doubt as to where that ley line is. It's only if it's clear that she's gone beyond it that a protest committee is going to get upset with red. Okay. Fun fact, if red falls clear astern of blue, Rule 17 no longer applies. Blue is the right-of-way boat because she's clear ahead. However, she can't jibe, especially from starboard onto port, with red here. So red is the keep clear boat. Red has to keep clear of blue as long as they stay clear ahead, clear astern. But blue is being controlled by red. She can't jibe and get across red. So from a tactical point of view, as you're coming down to this starboard tack ley line, you really want to be, if you really want to push blue beyond the ley line, you want to make sure you're clear astern and slightly to leeward of blue so that blue cannot jibe. But Rule 17 doesn't become an issue for you as red, because as soon as you get the leeward overlap, you're then limited to your proper course. And the moment you get the overlap, you better be jibing to go to the mark. Okay, so that's a place where, how the rules work gives you either an advantage or a disadvantage based on the overlap. Okay. If
John,
you're blue,
may I ask you to talk about the fact if, hypothetically speaking, blue flips the boom on the other side for a few seconds and flips it back while the boats are overlapped?
okay, sure. So we talked about what the definition of proper course is. We also talked about what it means to be overlapped. Okay. So, so again, in the beginning of Rule 17, it said overlapped within 2 of her hull lengths to leeward of a boat on the same tack. Okay. So we do have 2 types of overlaps, and Sergey, let me get back to your question. We have 2 types of overlaps. Say red established her overlap to windward of blue. Well, this is not an overlap that's limited by Rule 17, right? Because the overlap was not established to leeward by crossing this line, right? This 2 boat length line was established to windward. So blue is not limited in her ability to sail above her proper course. She can luff red as much as she would like. Okay. In the same way, if red established her overlap to leeward, but outside of this 2 boat length long line, okay, then red is not limited by Rule 17 to not sailing above her proper course. So if she establishes her overlap out here, she can then sail as high as she wants and is free to luff blue as much as she would like. It's only when you establish your overlap to leeward by crossing this 2 boat length line that you're limited to your proper course. Okay. In addition, if I do establish the overlap by crossing this line, and then I sail outside the 2 boat length line, and then back in again and back up, I'm not limited by Rule 17 to sailing no higher than my proper course. Okay. So now let's talk about, and it says, red is it says she shall not sail above her proper course while they remain on the same tack and overlapped within that distance. Okay. So now a couple of things can happen. Suppose it's not blowing city front in July and August, and you can actually, throw your main around. Suppose red would like to get rid of her Rule 17 obligation here, okay, but doesn't want to sail way out here and then back up again. Okay. What red can do is sail slightly down, jibe. Now the boats are still overlapped, but they're not on the same tack anymore. So Rule 17 turns off because they're no longer on the same tack and overlap. They're now on different tacks and overlapped. Red then can jibe back, and even though it's they remained overlapped, Rule 17 does not apply in this situation because red did this double jibe and jibe back. Okay. Rule 17 is now gone because the overlap that counts for they became overlapped on the same tack while red was already overlapped with her. So Rule 17 goes away. If blue does the same thing, right? If blue were to do a double jibe, blue has just handed red a weapon that says, please come and get me. I just turned Rule 17 off for you, and you can now luff to your heart's content. So it's really not a great idea for blue to do that double jibe. Okay. Any questions? Thoughts?
Let me, if I may, show you my screen and show you some hypothetical scenario, and I would like your comments on that. May I?
Sure.
Can you folks see my screen over there?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's say there are two hypothetical boats, one say Pelagia and one hypothetically say White Shadow, sailing on the San Francisco Bay to the Harding Rock, purely hypothetical. And as we can see, we are sailing from Black Collar, and that's sort of their situation developing here. So the 17 is a rounding mark. So I'm going to play a little video here. So Pelagia jibes, nearly at the same time, White Shadow jibes.
This seems oddly specific for a hypothetical situation.
It's all hypothetical. I just made that video. And now let's say hypothetically Pelagia laughing White Shadow, intending not to give her room at the mark while we're still not at 3 boat lengths. This is a 3 boat length circle. Does Pelagia have any obligation to sail her proper course, or she can take White Shadow head to wind if she chooses to do so?
Okay. So let's back it up a little bit and go back to, so the rules always apply. You can apply them in a snapshot and say, okay, who has the right of way? Who's got limitations, right? So in this case, both boats are on port, right? And I would say that White Shadow is clear astern of Pelagia, right?
That would be right if you just draw this line, Pelagia is clear ahead.
Right, right.
Yes.
So now, so what are the rights and limitations on the boats? Well, Pelagia, being the right of way, gets to sail her course, okay? And White Shadow, we'll say blue, right? And can people see my
Yes, we can see your screen.
picture, my screen largely enough? So red is right of way, and she can expect boats that are required to keep clear of her. She can expect them to allow her to continue to sail her course, her straight line course, okay, without interference. White Shadow's responsibility is to sail in a way that she keeps clear of Pelagia, of red. So blue is required to keep clear of red. And so that's the right of way situation. Blue can do whatever she wants as long as red can continue to sail her course, her straight line course. If red decides to alter course in any way, at every little, and you know, we tend to do turns and things like that, but essentially every little bit of that turn that red does, she's limited by Rule 16 to giving blue the room to keep that she needs to keep clear, continue to keep clear in a seaman-like way. So she can't suddenly alter course and say, you have to do whatever's possible, no matter how unseaman-like it is. Okay? So every little turn, Rule 16 applies. And at some point in here, as red continues to turn and blue continues on, right? Blue will probably get an overlap with red. And at that point, red, the right of way transfers from red to blue. And red is now required to allow blue to sail her course. Okay. So she turns, she turns, she turns. Blue, as she turns, she has continually given blue room to keep clear. So we're all good there. Blue has continued to keep clear. All good. Red then jibes from starboard to port, or from port to starboard. At that moment, the right of way transfers from blue to red. Red then has to give blue room because red acquired the right of way through her actions. She has a limitation that she is required to give blue the room needed to keep clear, initially keep clear, in a seaman-like way. Blue has to do whatever it is that she can do in a seaman-like way, which may be to come up and take red stern, to jibe, to take her spinnaker down, to doing whatever she needs to do in a seaman-like way. And she doesn't necessarily get to pick what that is. Red just has to give her an out. And that exists in a seaman-like way. So,
Hey, John,
and
can I interrupt you for a moment?
sure.
Sergey, is there a way in race cues to change the colors of the yachts? Because I keep getting confused by John saying red when I think he means Pelagia.
Yeah, I've got Pelagia being red.
Yeah. So if
Red
you can change
spinnaker.
White
See the
Shadow
red
to be blue
spinnaker
and
here.
Pelagia
So
is
that
red.
red spinnaker is the red.
Red spinnaker is a
Yeah.
reference. Right. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, John.
That's okay. So now there's a jibe here. So now the boats, they initially were not overlapped, right? They started out not overlapped. Then Pelagia or red turned down and jibed, right? At some point, an overlap was established, but it was probably well outside, looking at the diagram, it was well outside that 2 boat length line from the stern of red, while red was still on port, right? Red jibes onto starboard. That line goes away because the boats are on opposite tacks. So there's no Rule 17 issue at this point. It's just simply port starboard, limiting the 2 boats, right? Blue is a port tack keep clear boat. Red starboard tack right of way, right? Things continue a little bit more. Blue decides to jibe. Okay. Well, blue jibes into a windward position here. Okay. Blue was the keep clear boat, or White Shadow was the keep clear boat. She jibes into a windward position, so she's still keep clear. Rule 17, none of the conditions that invoke Rule 17 apply. So Rule 17 isn't turned on, and Pelagia or red is not limited to proper course. And she can sail as high as she wants. She can go all the way head to wind if she so chooses. And blue, as the windward boat, is required to keep clear. Depending on all the conditions and what she wants to do, white shadow or blue could jibe back and take red's stern, or she could follow up. But again, every little turn that Pelagia makes or red makes, at every little degree of a turn, she has to give blue the room to keep clear in a seaman-like way. Okay. At some point, the boats have spinnakers up, right? At some point, you're going to get to the point where blue can no longer carry a kite. Okay. And the seaman-like thing to do, if you were going to sail that course or higher, is to take your spinnaker down. Red has to give blue that opportunity to take her kite down. Blue has to do it promptly in a seaman-like way. But before red can continue to turn up, she has to give blue that opportunity. And if she doesn't, then red will have broken rule 16 because she didn't give blue the room needed to keep clear. Okay. And this is why these limitations can be pretty powerful.
So may I ask you this question? So if Pelagia, so basically what's happening here, Pelagia intends, there was clear tactical intent, to sail straight to the Harding Rock and give no white shadow any room at the mark, while we still away from the tribute line zone. So that was tactical intent.
Well, the mark.
Let's say, here's my question. So mark has nothing to do with it. We're outside of the mark. Let's say Pelagia loses her steering, broaches into the wind, and forces white shadow broach into the wind, head up, without giving a chance to take the spinnaker down. So clearly, white shadow is not being given a seamanship-like way to hold clear.
Okay.
Can white shadow protest Pelagia in this case? And win?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is, again, what is, the definition of keep clear, and, rule 16 says when a right-of-way boat changes course, she shall give the other boat room to keep clear.
In seamanship-like manner.
Well, right. It shall give the other boat room, and room is a defined term. Room is a defined term. It says the definition of room is the space a boat needs in the existing conditions, including space to comply with her obligations under the rules of Part 2, which is what we're dealing with, while maneuvering promptly in a seaman-like way. So, red, the leeward boat, has, when she changes course, and it's simply the compass course, right? When a right-of-way boat changes course, she shall give the other boat room to keep clear. Okay. So if red suddenly broaches, is she changing course? My answer's pretty clear, yes, I think. Right? So she's changing course. Nowhere in Rule 16 does it say, except if she's broaching. Right? It just says if she changes course.
So this is very interesting.
She shall give the other boat room to keep clear.
It's very interesting. It's not proper course to the mark. It's changing course.
Correct.
It's changing compass heading. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. I've never interpreted it that way in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what it is. So the definition of keep clear, which we haven't talked about, a boat keeps clear of a right-of-way boat if the right-of-way boat can sail her course with no need to take avoiding action. And when the boats are overlapped, if the right-of-way boat can also change course in both directions without immediately making contact. So there's a concept called wiggle room. And when two boats in if we were midwinter sailing, right? The boats can get close enough, but Red needs to be able to wiggle. She needs to be able to turn up and down a little bit in both directions without immediately making contact. Blue has to give her that much room, at least that much room. Okay. When you read the appeals and everything, sailing, it does it as I said, the boat can sail her course. Well, her course is the direction, the compass direction that she's going. That's her course. And if the windward boat isn't allowing her to sail her course, right, which can happen if, you're kind of like this, right? Red's overlapped. Red's the right-of-way boat. Blue is the keep clear boat. Blue has to maneuver in a way that allows Red to sail her compass course. And in general, she's got to move out to windward a little bit and increase this gap in a way that Red can continue to sail her course. And then if they're overlapped, Red can alter her course in both directions without immediately making contact. Okay. And this is true all the time. So like in a port starboard situation, right? Blue has to keep clear of Red. Red doesn't get to luff, doesn't get, suppose the wind changes direction and there's a big lift. Red does not get to follow that lift if it prevents Blue from keeping clear. So if initially Blue was going to cross Red, and Blue is committed to going across Red and is keeping clear in that Red could sail her course, which is her straight line course. That's what you get to anticipate. Blue gets to assume that Red is going to continue to sail her straight line course when planning how they're going to go about keeping clear. Okay? Because if Red changes her course at all, right, she has to give Blue room to keep clear because of that change of course. So if Blue is initially crossing and Red stays on her course, her compass course, all's good. If there's a sudden lift to Red and Red follows it up, and all of a sudden Blue, who's now been headed, can no longer keep clear of Red because Red altered course, that's on Red. Red has broken Rule 16. Okay. We actually had an appeal here it was a San Francisco appeal where we had two boats on port like this. and starboard came in and had to duck the first port tack boat, and this blue boat broke rule 10, port starboard, right? Red then was sailing this course and altered back up to come back to close hauled. Okay. And made it so that green here could not keep clear by her alteration of course. And what was found was that when red altered her course down, right, the course that red was steering at this point, green was keeping clear. When red altered her course back up to close hauled, like many of us would want to do, right? Now red's change in course meant that green could not keep clear. And it was actually red that broke rule 16. Red then ducked green and essentially unbroke rule 16. It's the only rule in the book that you can unbreak. And then red went on, and red protested both blue and green. Green was exonerated and blue was disqualified.
John,
So
may I show you? I'm sorry.
it's all about the compass course.
So may I show you a hypothetical video? So here's hypothetical video. Let's say one boat sailing. This is one.
Sergey, we don't see your video.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Share screen.
And I'll warn you, video is notoriously bad.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
All right. So I know video is bad, but I'll just give you some of just what transpired, and I'm curious to hear your take on this situation. Realizing video is actually depth of field and all that stuff. So this is 1/5 of the real speed, but it's going to be quick. So this boat is jibing.
Okay. So they're starting on port,
Jibing and starboard.
still on port, still on port, still on port, starboard. Okay. So at this instant, right? At this instant, rule 15 applies. Well,
So there's one more boat crossing.
maybe rule 15 applies, and maybe it's just rule 16 because you're a right-of-way boat altering course. You can't tell if you can't tell whether or not, as this boat turned down, an overlap was established before they jibed.
Let me play. This is actually a different segment when I'm curious to hear your take on. So one boat jibe, keep in mind the slow-mo. The second boat jibes right underneath her.
Now
Sergey, the video is not playing.
Yeah.
The video is not playing?
No.
No. And it's impossible for us to tell how much distance there is between the boats right now.
So you cannot see the video, right? Stop share.
No.
All right.
No, it froze.
Okay. All right. Never mind. I was trying to show you something from the race course. All right, folks. Does anybody have any other questions? Rule 17.
So I was going to cover one other thing about Rule 17 that happens at the start and is not an infrequent thing to happen at the start. Let me grab my Race committee vote. Okay. So we've got a starting line here. Very typical kind of a situation. And I might be a boat here that's a little bit early. And so red is going slow. Okay. Blue with a little bit more speed. We're going to put green here, who's just head to wind, totally luffing. Blue coming in with more speed says, here's a hole that I can get in and get going, right? They now establish an overlap from clear astern. And what's the first thing that blue does? They're going to luff red up head to wind, right? They're going to want to go here, leave a nice hole here for them to turn down and accelerate into, right? So they want to come close up to red, but as they've come in, right, from clear astern, right, they've come up, they've given red the room that red needs as the now windward boat to keep clear. Blue comes here. The starting gun goes. Okay. Can blue stay head to wind once the starting gun has gone? Okay. The answer is no, because of Rule 17. Rule 17 applies on a windward leg. Okay. It's not just a rule about going downwind. Okay. Blue, remember, she came in with speed. She established an overlap within two of her boat lengths from red. There's no proper course before the starting signal. Okay. So she can luff up above close hauled as much as she wants until the starting signal goes. And once the starting signal has gone, she is limited to not sailing above her proper course, which in the absence of red would be to sail a close hauled course. Okay. So blue, once the starting gun has gone, with respect to red, cannot sail above her proper course. Okay. Blue as windward boat to green can't hit green. So she may have to luff to avoid green as a windward keep clear boat. But if green weren't here, blue would have to bear away to a close hauled course and sail out of there once the starting gun has gone. Okay. So that's something to be aware of.
So go back and say, so green was head to wind,
Right.
but
So green's
blue did not establish overlap from behind on green.
on green. Right.
And so as soon as the gun goes off, can green stay head to wind?
Green can absolutely stay head to wind. Rule 17 doesn't limit her at all because
Right.
the overlaps here were all established were all established from,
From
now,
coming clear astern.
Blue's overlap on red was from clear astern.
Right.
Okay. But now if we back the whole thing up a little further, right? Suppose green came in and established the overlap from clear astern on red, right? And luffs red up. And now green is here head to wind and still within this 2 boat length line on red. Green is still in that sort of along that line. Okay. So now green's overlap on red was from clear astern. So there is a Rule 17 obligation going on between these 2 boats. Now blue comes in, establishes her overlap, right? Rule 17 applies between red and blue, but not between blue and green. So when the starting gun goes off, green has an obligation to red, even though blue is in between them. Green has an obligation to red not to sail above her proper course and has to bear off. So you have to keep track of how all the overlaps were established within the, within 2 boat lengths. Now, typically on the starting line, this kind of a situation is just a whole bunch of dominoes falling down because green wants to get going as quickly as possible. She's done what she wanted to do in the pre-start of controlling blue and red and making sure that she gets to go first, right? There's nothing more to be gained by green once the starting gun has gone. Okay. But you always need to think about how Rule 17 applies and when it applies. If, say, you're coming up on a, you've got an offset, right? Boat goes around, second boat comes around and establishes the overlap to leeward on that short offset leg. When the boats come down here and that overlap has remained, just because you've changed legs, blue is still limited by Rule 17 to her proper course. She was entitled to mark room as an inside overlapped boat. Red gives it to her, but then green needs to come down and sail her proper course because she established her overlap from clear astern, even though it was on a previous leg. Blue can't, once they get past the mark and mark room has been given by red, blue can't continue to sail red off the course if blue is sailing higher than her proper course at that point in time. Okay. So this Rule 17 obligation continues as long as the overlap exists and the boats are within 2 boat lengths of each other. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. John, I do have time for one last question, kind of related to this topic of mark room. I'd like to understand a little better the definition of when a boat is entitled to mark room, and especially as it pertains to rounding the mark. When and up to what point does the outside boat has to give mark room to the inside boat?
Okay.
And when do we say that the inside boat has been given enough room to round the mark? When is the completion of the rounding?
Well, very good questions. There isn't, on the second part of your question, there's not a great answer. even from the rule makers, there's not a great answer. So the first part of Rule 18, which is 18.1, which tells us when the rule applies.
Mhm.
So it says it applies between boats when they are required to leave a mark on the same side and at least one of them is in the zone. And zone is italicized. And it is, in our case, a 3 boat length circle around the mark. Okay. Unfortunately, it's really hard to see that on the water. Every time we paint those lines out there, they keep going away. And there are actually people experimenting with marks that have like a laser light on them that draw for one design classes will draw a 3 length, try and draw it on the water so you can see it.
Wow.
But it's a little, we don't have that quite yet. Okay. So one of them is in the zone, which is inside the 3 boat length circle. So that's when the rule can apply. Then there's some exceptions, which says, however, it does not apply between boats on opposite tacks on a beat to windward. So we all know, coming to a port tack rounding or starboard tack rounding, the boat on port is not an inside boat to the boat on starboard. This is just Rule 10, not Rule 18, as long as the boats are on opposite tacks. Between boats on opposite tacks when the proper course at the mark for one but not both of them is to tack, and that's sort of a very special case. Between a boat approaching a mark and one leaving it, or the mark is a continuing obstruction. Okay, so a continuing obstruction would be like when we do, it wasn't Vallejo, but there was, I think it was Silver Eagle, where we used to use like the pier out, the ship pier at Vallejo. That would also be a continuing obstruction that's a mark, or around the islands, because Angel Island is big enough to be both a mark and an obstruction. And then it says Rule 18 no longer applies between boats when mark room has been given.
Yep.
That's
exactly where I'm stuck.
The problem is nobody can define what that is. In general, an acceptable definition is that mark room no longer is, that Rule 18 no longer applies when the inside, when the mark itself is no longer a factor in the inside boat's course.
So, for example, it would not touch the mark if it was going to its proper course.
Right. And in general, one thing that almost everybody agrees on is that when the mark is astern of the inside boat, mark room has been given. In general, you can draw crazy situations where that's not true, but for most, 99% of our cases, if the mark's astern of you, it's no longer a factor in your course. If your proper course was to jibe at the mark, it's not going to stop you from jibing, right? If you wanted to tack at the mark, right? Once it's astern of you, you can tack without worrying about hitting the mark. That's the generally accepted definition. I can tell you that the rule writers are working diligently on a new Rule 18 that supposedly doesn't change the game, but helps make a lot of this stuff clearer, including that definition.
Hey, John, humor me. Can you put number 1 slightly lower the green mark like that, and make her on other tab,
On
another tab. Yeah, right.
on port tack.
On port tack,
Okay.
yeah. So she rounded and she's still in the port tack. And let's say
Okay.
another boat, let's say green, we round it to port. We round it to starboard. So this is the leeward mark gate rounded to starboard. So the green trying to sneak in that particular.
So we have a gate.
The pink is on the other side. Would you please? Yeah, pink is on the other side. Yeah. So
Okay.
So the blue had a bad douse and couldn't jibe. So she's sailing past that mark.
Okay. So
she's coming aside, having bad jibe, keep sailing. She sailed way past the mark, right there. Green gave her plenty of room in trying to go behind her between the mark and that boat. Would the rule 18 apply in that case? Green is right at her stern.
Well,
but would that rule 18 apply now?
Has green given blue the room to go to sail? The definition of mark room is the room needed to sail from wherever you are in the zone to the mark and around it. That's the definition of the definition of mark room. So you can think of giving. So you can think
blue has
of
a bad
mark
jibe.
room.
So blue had a bad jibe and keeps sailing on the same course.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what Rule 18 means and doesn't mean. Okay. Rule 18 is all about who is entitled to mark room, if anybody. There are plenty of situations where neither boat is entitled to mark room. Okay. But once a boat enters, if a boat enters the 3 boat length zone, right, in a position where they are entitled to mark room, okay, and we kind of got up a little bit high on the board here, but if we're going around the mark to starboard, right, boats are both here on starboard tack, heading to the mark. Okay. Normally, in this situation, green is the right of way boat. Okay. She's also the outside boat. Without Rule 18, green could luff blue and prevent blue from rounding the mark because blue has to keep clear of green. Right. And way back in the 30s, that's how the rules worked. Blue didn't get room, but the sailors at the time decided that really wasn't Corinthian. And so they basically then said, the inside boat gets to go around the mark and a right of way boat can't do anything about it. Rule 18, the fundamentals of Rule 18 or the mechanics of it are that an inside boat gets to sail to the mark and around it. They get that room. The magic that happens is that while blue is sailing within that room to which she is entitled, she is automatically exonerated for breaking port starboard, windward leeward, clear ahead, clear astern, initially obtaining right of way, altering course, and Rule 17. She gets to break all of those rules with complete exoneration all the time. And that's the magic of Rule 18. Rule 18 doesn't change who the right-of-way boat is. It just gives the inside boat a huge get-out-of-jail-free card.
As long as it goes around the mark.
Correct. If blue, but the rest of the right-of-way rules and everything don't turn off, right? Green is still the right-of-way boat here. As the boats sail to the mark, green is still the right-of-way boat. But blue gets exonerated automatically for breaking Rule 11, in this case, windward-leeward, as she's sailing to the mark, right? Automatic exoneration. And that's why green can't have her way with blue, because blue doesn't have to do anything. And when you read most protest decisions, they will say, oh, blue broke Rule 11, but was entitled to mark room under 18.2b and therefore is exonerated for breaking Rule 11. They'll structure the decision that way to recognize that it's not that blue suddenly has the right of way. It's that blue's entitled to mark room and all the privileges that come with it.
So, John,
if blue sails outside of this corridor, all bets are off.
What is that corridor zone?
This corridor is what we're saying is mark room. It's the room that blue needs at the time she becomes entitled to mark room, right? When the two boats enter the zone,
right.
From that moment on, blue is entitled to sail to the mark and around it, and she gets to use her get out of jail free card. Everything that happens outside the zone is just all the regular rules. So if green decides she wants to luff blue, she better do it outside the zone. Because once she's inside the zone, green has an obligation to give blue mark room. And if she doesn't give blue this corridor to sail to the mark and around it, then green has broken Rule 18.
But let's assume when blue gets to the mark.
Dave, give me a chance. I want to just finish this situation.
So now we get back to Sergei's situation where
yes.
blue comes in. She decides, okay, I want to sail up here a little bit. And in doing so, blue is taking a little bit of a risk because she's almost sailing outside of her corridor, but she always gets to turn back and sail to the mark. So blue comes up. She wants to do a little jibe in here, has a problem.
Continue going down.
And continues to go down. As soon as she's no longer sailing to the mark and around it, she's no longer sailing within the mark room to which she's entitled. And her get out of jail free card goes away. Okay. Remember her get out of jail. And so now if she's on port and green's on starboard, it's simply a port starboard situation. Because Rule 18, the exoneration, even though blue is the inside boat and entitled to mark room, if she's not sailing in that mark room, her get out of jail free card is no longer any good. Okay. Now she's got a problem with green in a port starboard situation. If blue is clear ahead, right? If blue kind of comes down here and still is having problems, green is here, right? Blue is no longer sailing into the mark room. She's entitled. So her get out of jail free card is gone, right? Even though Rule 18 still says she's entitled to mark room, if she's not sailing in it, no get out of jail free card. Okay, so once she's past the mark and not sailing around it, we're left now with just a port starboard situation. And if green can't continue straight on her course, because there is no rule that says you have to go around, that green has to go around the mark. If green can no longer sail her course without taking avoiding action because of blue, in this case, blue has broken port starboard. As soon as, if blue jives, right, then we're all back to, again, back to a clear astern, clear ahead boat, Rule 12, and it's green's obligation to keep clear of blue. But as long as blue is still on port and no longer sailing to the mark and around it or within that mark room, then she's going to break Rule 10 with respect to green.
So if you back up a little bit and you say, I can imagine a situation where I'm coming into that, I'm blue, I'm coming into that leeward mark on starboard. The boat on the outside is also on starboard.
Yep.
And I screw up my douse and I can't turn up because I screw up and I drive down instead of turning,
Yeah.
So we haven't
so you
switched
come
to
down
port
here
starboard
and now
rule.
you're down here,
Right.
And all hell's breaking loose on your boat.
Right.
So the question becomes, so you were a windward keep clear boat here,
Right.
You've come down and you've turned, and green has managed to keep the overlap, right? And you're a windward boat and you're sagging down because you've had a really terrible douse.
Right.
Okay.
It happens to me all the time.
So are you now sailing to the mark and around it?
Actually, at this point, I'm just trying to survive.
You're trying to survive. So
have I screwed?
Yes.
Have I violated a rule? Which rule?
Rule 11. So again, here, remember, our right-of-way rules don't change. Rule 11 still requires you as the windward boat to keep clear. But if you're sailing to the mark and around it, right, you're sailing within the mark room you're entitled to, and your get out of jail free card is good. As soon as you're not sailing to the mark and around it, your get out of jail free card goes poof. And now green says, hey, I've given you mark room. You're sailing outside of it. You're the windward boat. You have to keep clear, and they can protest you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
John, can you do me a favor? Can you put two boats, both of them, like the same position, just to your left, let's move them forward. So let's say blue has still struggling, and she passed the mark, like move her to the left, right? And she's
So
still
like
on the
this?
reach. She's still on the reach. She's still on the reach, like that. And she's dragging green with her. Then green protests her.
Yeah. Okay. So again, is blue. So blue is required by Rule 11 to keep clear. Right? Rule 18 really is likely off at this point. You know, if the mark is astern of these two boats, Rule 18 is really off, right? The mark is no longer a factor in the course these boats are steering, right? Green has given blue the room to sail to the mark and around it, and then some, right? So blue's get out of jail free card is gone. And blue is required to keep clear of green and is not. Right? The boats are overlapped. Green needs to be able to head up a little bit and can't do it. So, you know, green can't make that slight alteration of course without blue being in the way. And that's part of the room, the keeping clear room that blue owes green.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you sag outside of that, you know, that sort of corridor to sail to the mark and around it, then that's where the problems for blue come in.
John, I cannot thank you enough from, I guess, everybody. For me, it was amazingly enlightening, even though I've been through this bunch, but it's always learned something new. And,
Thank you, John.
I hope we can continue, hopefully without a protest proceeding, just on a regular basis, if you've been so inclined.
Yeah,
that would make the
I'm happy to do these sessions as often as you'd like.